In the town of Dalhust, an eager and dedicated teacher named Ms. Clara joined Ridgeview High School. Her reputation as a kind-hearted but firm educator preceded her. Ms. Clara, a woman in her mid-20s with an unwavering passion for teaching, quickly became a favorite among students. She taught with grace and precision, weaving stories of inspiration into her lessons. But beneath her pleasant demeanor was a sharp awareness of her surroundings. In one of her classes was a quiet yet peculiar student named Sandra. Sandra was unlike her peers. She rarely smiled, spoke only when called upon, and avoided eye contact. Clara noticed Sandra's odd behavior and was determined to understand the root of her struggles. One afternoon, during a science lesson, Sandra's attitude took a shocking turn. She laughed mockingly when Clara corrected her assignment. The laughter silenced the class. "Sandra, that's enough," Clara said firmly. Sandra's gaze turned cold, but she complied, retreating into silence. That evening, Clara had a strange feeling she couldn't shake off. Something about Sandra's behavior unsettled her, but she dismissed it as exhaustion. As she prepared for bed, her mind wandered back to that chilling moment in class, unaware of the storm brewing ahead. The following day, Sandra approached Clara with an unusual smile. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. Clara nodded, accepting the apology but sensing the tension behind Sandra's words. Later that day, while grading papers, Clara felt an unbearable heat on her hand. She looked down to find an inexplicable welt forming on her palm. Panicked, she rushed to the nurse's office, but the nurse found nothing unusual. Clara's hand throbbed with pain, and unease settled in her heart. Back in the classroom, Sandra watched Clara from her seat, her eyes glinting with something sinister. "Time will tell," she whispered under her breath, sending shivers down the spine of her desk mate. Clara, unaware of Sandra's ominous mutterings, resolved to ignore the pain and focus on her work. But deep inside, she knew this was no ordinary ailment. Something, or someone, was at play. Clara sought medical help for her mysterious ailment. Despite numerous tests, doctors couldn't identify the cause. Frustrated and confused, Clara confided in her close friend, Bianca, a fervent believer in spiritual warfare. "This isn't physical, Clara," Bianca said after listening intently. "I think you're under spiritual attack." Clara laughed nervously. "That's absurd," she replied, but Bianca's words lingered. Meanwhile, Sandra attended a meeting at an eerie, hidden location. The air was thick with darkness as hooded figures chanted in unison. Sandra recounted her encounter with Clara. "She dared to challenge me," Sandra sneered. "We must teach her a lesson." The coven leader, a towering figure shrouded in shadows, raised a hand, silencing the group. "Let her suffer," he commanded. That night, Clara's dreams were haunted by visions of fire and chains. She woke up drenched in sweat, her hand now swollen to twice its size. Something was terribly wrong, and she was running out of time. Clara decided to confide in Mr. Grayson, the school's principal. She shared her experiences, hoping he could provide guidance. But as she spoke, Mr. Grayson's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "Clara, I think you're overworked," he said dismissively. "Take some time off." Clara's protest fell on deaf ears. As she left his office, a feeling of abandonment washed over her. She wasn't just fighting an unknown force, she was now utterly alone. Hours later, Clara received an email from the principal. "Due to your recent behavior, we believe it's best you take a leave of absence," the message read. Heartbroken, Clara stared at the screen. Her career, her passion, was slipping through her fingers. Bianca visited her that evening. Seeing her friend's swollen hand and defeated spirit, she made a decision. "We're going to pray, Clara. This battle isn't over." Clara hesitated but nodded. In her heart, she knew prayer might be her only hope. Bianca wasted no time. She gathered a group of prayer warriors from her church, explaining Clara's plight and the urgency of the situation. The group agreed to hold nightly prayer sessions at Clara's home. Clara, though hesitant, joined in. Each night, their prayers grew more fervent, creating an atmosphere of spiritual defiance. Meanwhile, Sandra's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She often mumbled incoherently in class, her eyes flashing with an unnatural glow. Other students began avoiding her, sensing something malevolent. One evening, while Clara and Bianca prayed, Clara's swollen hand began to pulsate. She cried out in pain, but Bianca gripped her shoulder tightly. "Don't stop praying," she urged. In the shadows, Sandra and the coven gathered again. Their leader, infuriated by the prayers, performed a ritual to strengthen their hold on Clara. "We must break her spirit before she grows too strong," he growled. The battle between light and darkness was intensifying, and both sides knew the stakes were higher than ever. As Clara's prayers continued, strange occurrences began in her home. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered, and cold drafts swept through the rooms. Bianca and the prayer warriors remained steadfast, undeterred by the mounting spiritual disturbances. One night, while praying, Clara's body shook violently as if she were caught in a storm. "Hold on, Clara. The enemy is losing its grip," Bianca shouted. The atmosphere grew heavy, and Clara's swollen hand began to glow faintly. The warriors knew they were waging a battle in the spiritual realm, and they intensified their prayers, calling for divine intervention. Meanwhile, Sandra's coven felt the resistance. Their leader summoned more dark forces, but cracks were appearing in their control. "This teacher's faith is stronger than we anticipated," he admitted grudgingly. Sandra's confidence wavered as she experienced strange dreams of light overpowering darkness, leaving her restless and confused. Sandra began questioning her allegiance to the coven. The visions of light left her unsettled, and she started avoiding their meetings. The coven leader noticed her reluctance and warned, "If you waver, you will face consequences." Back at school, Clara noticed a shift in Sandra. The girl seemed withdrawn, no longer exuding the malice she once did. During a lunch break, Sandra approached Clara. "I need help," she whispered, her voice trembling. Clara, though wary, saw a glimmer of hope in Sandra's plea. That evening, Sandra appeared at Clara's doorstep, clutching a small notebook. "This has everything you need to know," she said, handing it over. The notebook contained rituals, names, and symbols tied to the coven. It was a dangerous possession, but Clara knew it could be the key to ending the battle once and for all. The notebook revealed chilling details about the coven's operations, including their control over several influential figures in Dalhest. Clara shared the information with Bianca, who immediately recognized some of the symbols. "These are ancient marks of bondage," Bianca explained. "Breaking them won't be easy, but it's possible." Sandra began attending the prayer sessions at Clara's house, seeking refuge from the coven. Her presence unsettled the prayer warriors, but Clara insisted they welcome her. "She's choosing the light," Clara said firmly. The coven leader, enraged by Sandra's betrayal, unleashed a new wave of attacks. One night, Clara woke to find her room filled with a suffocating darkness. She could hear whispers taunting her, but she clutched the notebook and began to pray aloud. The darkness dissipated, but she knew the battle was far from over. As Clara and Bianca delved deeper into the notebook, they discovered that the coven's influence extended beyond the school. Business owners, community leaders, and even law enforcement were under their sway. The revelation shook Clara to her core. "This isn't just about me," she realized. "The whole town is at risk." Bianca suggested organizing a town-wide prayer meeting. "If we unite in faith, we can break their hold," she said. Clara hesitated, knowing the risks, but agreed. They began reaching out to churches and community groups, rallying support for the event. The coven, sensing the threat, intensified their efforts. Clara's home became a battleground, with nightly disturbances escalating to physical attacks. Yet, Clara stood firm, her faith unshaken. "They won't win," she vowed. The day of the prayer meeting arrived, and people from all over Dalhest gathered at the town square. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and a palpable sense of unity. Bianca led the crowd in prayer, calling for deliverance and protection. As the prayers rose, a dark cloud formed over the town, and a fierce wind swept through the square. Sandra, standing beside Clara, began to tremble. "They're here," she whispered. The crowd's prayers grew louder, a chorus of faith pushing back against the encroaching darkness. In the spiritual realm, the coven launched their final assault. The battle was fierce, with light clashing against darkness in a spectacle unseen by mortal eyes. Clara, gripping the notebook, felt an overwhelming surge of power. She shouted, "In the name of the Almighty, you have no power here." The darkness shattered, and a blinding light enveloped the square. The people erupted in cheers as the oppressive cloud dissipated. Sandra fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She was free, and so was the town. But Clara knew this victory was only the beginning of a much larger journey. As dawn broke over Dalhest, the town awoke to an unfamiliar sense of peace. The oppressive weight that had gripped the community for years was gone. Clara walked through the town square, now empty but still resonating with the prayers and unity from the previous night. She felt a mix of relief and unease. Though the darkness had been driven back, she knew the coven was not entirely defeated. Sandra, now staying at Bianca's home for her safety, began sharing more about the coven. "They're scattered, but they'll regroup," she warned. "Their leader won't let this go." Bianca listened intently, her resolve only strengthening. "We'll be ready," she said. Clara decided to visit the principal, Mr. Grayson, to share what had transpired. To her surprise, he was no longer in his office. A new principal had been appointed overnight, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Draper. Clara felt an immediate sense of calm around her. "I'm here to clean up this school," Ms. Draper declared. Clara couldn't help but feel hopeful. Perhaps the tide was truly turning. Despite the victory, strange occurrences continued to plague Clara's home. Items moved on their own, and faint whispers filled the air at night. Bianca suggested a house cleansing, gathering the prayer warriors once more. As they prayed through each room, Clara felt the atmosphere lighten, but a lingering shadow seemed to resist. Meanwhile, Sandra experienced vivid dreams of her former coven. She saw them plotting in a dark, cold forest. Their leader, a figure cloaked in black, held a staff that glowed with a malevolent energy. "We'll take back what's ours," he hissed. Bianca interpreted Sandra's dreams as warnings. "They're regrouping and they'll come back stronger," she said. Clara and Bianca began preparing for the inevitable confrontation, rallying more prayer warriors and reaching out to neighboring churches for support. One evening, as Clara and Bianca discussed their next steps, a knock sounded at the door. Standing outside was an elderly man with a kind but weathered face. "My name is Pastor Elijah," he introduced himself. "I heard about what happened here and came to offer my help." Pastor Elijah was known for his expertise in spiritual warfare. He quickly became a mentor to the group, teaching them advanced strategies for combating the darkness. "The key is unity and unwavering faith," he said. "The enemy thrives on division and fear." With Pastor Elijah's guidance, the group's prayers became more focused and powerful. Even Sandra found herself growing stronger in faith, shedding the guilt and fear that had weighed her down. Sandra's nightmares grew more intense. She saw her former coven leader preparing a massive ritual. The forest was alive with dark energy, and shadows moved with purpose. "They're coming soon," she told Clara and Bianca. Pastor Elijah suggested a town-wide fast and prayer chain to fortify their defenses. Word spread quickly, and the community rallied together once more. Churches, families, and even skeptics joined in, united by a common purpose. In the spiritual realm, the coven felt the rising power of Dalhest's prayers. Their leaders snarled, "We must strike now before their faith becomes unshakable." The final confrontation was drawing near. On a moonless night, Dalhest's prayer warriors gathered in the town square. The air was thick with anticipation. Clara, Bianca, and Pastor Elijah led the group, their voices strong and unwavering. Sandra stood among them, her hands trembling but her heart resolute. As midnight approached, a chilling wind swept through the square. Shadows began to coalesce at the edges of the gathering, forming into twisted, humanoid shapes. The coven had arrived. The prayer warriors held their ground, their voices rising in unison. Light and darkness clashed in a battle unseen by the physical eye. Clara felt a surge of divine energy coursing through her. She stepped forward, holding the notebook high. "This ends now," she declared. In the spiritual realm, the battle was fierce. The coven leader unleashed waves of dark energy, but they were met by shields of light formed by the prayers of the warriors. Pastor Elijah stood at the forefront, his words like thunder, dismantling the enemy's strongholds. Sandra, though afraid, found herself drawn into the battle. She prayed with a fervor she didn't know she possessed. Her former coven leader sneered, "You're weak, Sandra. You'll never be free." But Sandra's voice didn't waver. "I am free," she replied, her words piercing through the darkness. As the battle raged, Clara remembered the symbols in the notebook. She began reciting them aloud, breaking each one in the name of the Almighty. With every word, the darkness weakened, and the coven leader's power waned. The prayer warriors intensified their efforts, creating a wall of light that pushed the coven back. One by one, the dark figures began to dissolve, their screams echoing into the night. The leader was the last to fall, his staff shattering as he disappeared into the void. As the first rays of sunlight broke over Dalhust, the town square was filled with an overwhelming sense of peace. The battle was over, and the town was free. Clara, Bianca, and Sandra embraced, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. Pastor Elijah gathered the group. "This is a victory, but the journey doesn't end here," he said. "We must remain vigilant and continue to grow in faith." Sandra decided to dedicate her life to helping others escape the darkness she had once known. With Clara and Bianca's support, she began sharing her story, bringing hope to those who felt trapped. The scars left by the coven's influence began to heal. Businesses thrived, families reunited, and the community grew closer than ever. Clara returned to Ridgeview High, where she was welcomed as a hero. Ms. Draper worked alongside her to ensure the school remained a safe and nurturing environment. Sandra, now a beacon of hope, spoke at local churches and youth groups. Her story inspired many to seek faith and reject the darkness in their lives. Years later, Dalhust was unrecognizable from the town it had once been. The unity forged through faith and prayer transformed it into a thriving community. Clara, Bianca, and Sandra remained close, their bond unbreakable. Clara often reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She knew the battle against darkness was ongoing, but she also knew they were never alone. The legacy they had built, a legacy of light, would endure for generations to come. What a journey! The story of Clara, Sandra, and the town of Dalhust is one of courage, faith, and triumph over darkness. Like and subscribe to stay updated with more thrilling and inspiring content. Share your thoughts in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Your engagement helps bring more stories like this to life.